Bonjour tout le monde.
Good afternoon, everyone. I call this meeting to order. So welcome to meeting number 3 of the Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs of the House of Commons. The committee is meeting today for an information session with the Veterans Ombud.
It's in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders, and members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Before we continue, I would ask that all in-person participants to consult the guidelines written on the cards on the table, and these measures are in place to help prevent audio and feedback incidents and to protect the health and safety of all participants, including the interpreters. And we always say merci beaucoup à nos interprètes.
And we always say thank you very much to our interpreters.
On the card, which links to a short awareness video. Écoutez, pour garantir le bon déroulement.
To ensure that things run smoothly, I would like to give some instructions to our witnesses and to our members of Parliament. Before speaking, wait until I call on you. If you're participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your microphone. Please mute yourself when you are not speaking. As far as interpretation is concerned, for those on Zoom, you have a choice between French, English, or the floor at the bottom of your screen. For those in the room, you can use the headset and select the desired channel. I'd like to remind you that all comments from members and witnesses must be addressed to the chair. For members present in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The committee clerk and I will do our best to maintain the order of speaking, and we thank you for your patience and understanding in this regard.
Come our witnesses. Colonel Retired Nishka Jardine, Veterans Ombuds, et Duane Shippers, Deputy Veterans Ombuds. And we will proceed to our panelists' opening remarks, followed by question and answer session. And de ma part, je voulais juste vous remercier.
And I would like personally to thank you very much for being here. You are officially our first witnesses, and we're anxious to hear from you. Thank you very much.
Bonjour, Madame la Présidente.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to address you about the work of the Office of the Veterans Ombud. Today, I am pleased to be joined by my Deputy and Legal Counsel, Mr. Duane Shippers. As you may know, the office was established by order in Council in 2007, and I am the 4th Veterans Ombud. Our mandate, simply put, is to investigate complaints and challenge the policies and decisions of Veterans Affairs Canada where we find individual or systemic unfairness. When I was appointed in November 2020, it was my personal impression that the majority of serving members and veterans had no idea of the existence of our office. Once the pandemic travel restrictions lifted, we undertook an ambitious outreach program.
Major military base. We held town halls in and around those locations to explain what we do and to hear directly from military and RCMP serving members, veterans, survivors, and families. I must say that the majority of veterans are satisfied with Veterans Affairs and what they receive in benefits. Many tell me how they feel well taken care of by VAC. But we have also heard the opposite, not all of which are things that VAC has the authority to rectify. The most compelling is that of access to a family doctor or primary care. As provided in the National Defence Act, regular force and some reserve force members receive all of their health care from the military medical system. On their release, they can obtain a provincial health card, and they are completely on their own to find a doctor. So many of them cannot. Without primary care, it can be impossible to refill prescriptions, particularly complex ones. Without primary care, it can be impossible to get the diagnosis they need to submit a disability claim to VAC. This is a complex issue that crosses both federal and provincial jurisdictions. Sans doute en raison de notre
Likely as a result of our outreach program, our office has seen a 35% increase in individual complaints since 2020. Among the top complaints we receive are complaints about wait times for disability benefits, which we can do little about, treatment benefit denials, and complaints related to the rehabilitation program. Complaints are reviewed by our trained analysts who determine whether the complainant was treated fairly. Where we find unfairness, we identify that to VAC, who will, in most cases, take steps to resolve the unfairness.
Likewise seeks to resolve unfairness in the administration of veterans' benefits and programs. Our website provides every systemic report we have written, and in our Spotlight publication, every still valid recommendation is listed together with its implementation status and whether the department accepts the recommendation. This committee recently published a historic report on women veterans, and we have also done work in this area. We received a complaint that the disability pensions of former RCMP women members were being reduced by the Merlo-Davidson sexual misconduct class action settlement amounts they had received. I wrote to the minister with our findings that Veterans Affairs was unfairly reducing the disability pensions of women RCMP members who had received settlement compensation. As a result, VAC contacted the affected women and resolved the unfairness. Par ailleurs, nous avons été informés d'une possible.
We were alerted to a possible unfairness in VAC processes for handling sexual dysfunction claims related to psychiatric conditions. We investigated and found systemic unfairness for women veterans in certain decision-making processes. VAC has since implemented our recommendations.
Subject of our report and recommendation for the provision of mental health treatment for family members in their own right for conditions related to service. We say that when the member serves, the family also serves. I've heard many heartbreaking stories of how family members can struggle with mental health because they are part of a military or RCMP family. I must credit Veterans Affairs for doing their best within the legislative guidelines to provide some mental health supports to family members, provided they can link it to the well-being of the veteran. But it is not enough. This recommendation will require legislative change. To be honest, the CAF and the RCMP have long depended on the silent support of our families. Veteran legislation, regulations, and policies have likewise done the same thing. For example, the Veterans Independence Program is designed to provide military veterans with some assistance in remaining in their own homes for as long as they can. But the VAC policy for administering this program presumes a live-in relative should take on the share of the veteran's household tasks that the veteran can no longer do. I wrote to the minister last year that it is not fair to ask a veteran's live-in relatives to take on the work that cannot be done by a veteran whose illness or injury is service-related. It is time to stop asking families over and over again to shoulder the burden of their veterans' service. Veterans Affairs Canada is charged with delivering benefits and programs to a unique community of Canadians who value trust and truth as the high watermark of service. We know that institutional trust is strengthened by clear, consistent, truthful communication. Veterans are highly sensitive to matters of trust. I have heard from some veterans and their families whose trust in the department has been eroded. They say, "I don't even understand why I have been denied this benefit." I firmly believe that the overarching purpose of our office is to reconnect veterans to Veterans Affairs Canada when they lose their trust in the department. This does not mean we always take the veteran's side when they come to us with a complaint. Indeed, we render a service of equal value when we say to a veteran, "Here are the facts of your case. Here are the rules that apply. The department has treated you fairly." In my view, the key is transparency. My office will continue to focus on how Veterans Affairs engages and communicates with veterans and their families, and specifically with those whose needs are more acute. We will continue to assist in navigating back benefits and services. And where we find unfairness, we will work to identify those gaps and barriers so that all veterans and their family members can request and receive the supports that Parliament has put in place for them to move forward in their civilian lives once their service to Canada is complete. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Colonel Jardine, and on behalf of all of us, I'll say thank you for your service, and especially on this week, and I think yesterday or the day before was Family Day for our veterans' families, so always a pleasure in recognizing your work and the extraordinary work of our military and our veterans. We will now proceed with our round of questions. Each of you will start with the 6 minutes, and Mr. Tolmie, you are the first.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate it. And I echo the comments. We know that we've had you be here before, and make sure my mic is on. And we're a little bit rusty. It's our first meeting back, so I apologize. But thank you for your service. Thank you for your role with the Ombud. Reading your report, I would like to compliment you. It's very good report, very comprehensive. I like the fact that you've included a timeline, and that you're updating us on what's been implemented and what's not been implemented. So my first question to you is, can you kind of explain, when I read through where it says partially agree, partially implemented, what does that mean to the reader? Because it's just a chart form, and I need a little bit of an understanding on that. If you could share that with me.
Thank you for the question. You're speaking of our Spotlight report, where we list every recommendation that's still valid. Partially agree means that there might be some aspect of the recommendation that the department concurs with, and some aspect that they don't agree with. And for implementation, if we find that, and we spend a great deal of time working on this report, and we're back and forth with Veterans Affairs, where we find that they've made progress enough that we can say this looks like it's going to come to completion, then we say it's in progress or partially implemented.
Okay, thank you very much. So some of the comments that you've made in your testimony, would you say that your report is firm but fair, recognizing both sides and the challenges of implementing some of the recommendations that you've brought forward?
We certainly acknowledge that it takes time to implement change. And the department, to make these changes, it's not as simple as, just kind of waving your hand. There's policy that needs to be written, things that need to be put in place. So we fully appreciate that it can take time for recommendations to be implemented or be in progress to being implemented. So, for example, where we've put out a report in the past year, we don't track that yet. We've listed the report and the recommendations, but we say not yet tracked, because we give a full year before we ask them, so how's it going on this one?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your help on that. As I said, just reading it, we want to make sure that, so just a sidebar question then. Would you say that all of the recommendations that you bring forward are ones that should be implemented?
That's a very good question. It's a question we ask ourselves. And we recently had the entire slate of recommendations reviewed by an outside agency for relevance. And so we've removed the recommendations that have what I would say are overcome by events. They're just no longer valid. So I can say that with certainty that the recommendations that you see listed in that report are ones that the office continues to stand behind.
Okay. So that brings me to this question. And I want your honest opinion. And that's why you're here. Do you feel it's difficult to implement the recommendations that you've brought forward to VAC?
The recommendations span a whole host of benefits and programs and policies. They're very wide-ranging. The work that's been done by this office since its inception in 2007 has gone across the entire breadth, and there are still things we have not yet had a chance to look at. I think sometimes, as time goes on, we see things differently and things change. As I said, I stand by them. We stand by all of the recommendations that are there. Would we maybe have worded them differently today than they were worded 7 years ago or 8 or 10 years ago? Probably.
Okay, I say that because you've included a historical timeline, and when I go back, I see prior to 2015 a lot of green marks, a lot of things that have been implemented. And then at that pivotal point in 2015, we see that there's not so much being implemented, things that have not been accepted, things that are partially accepted, things that are no longer tracked. And I just find it that at 2015 that is a pivotal point in our timeline. And so I just want to say thank you for your report and for your honesty. And do you have an opinion on that, of why that would have changed at 2015?
I can't speak to what was the case in 2015, certainly well before my time. Maybe, Dwayne, I think you were at the office certainly longer than me.
I just know that there was a change in government, and so I just...
So the time, when something is marked doesn't mean it was completed in those years. So what happened post? I think there was a massive there were massive changes to the veterans legislation in the post-2015 period around there's pension for life, and there's a number of budget implementation bills that included a number of provisions that addressed things that had been recommended leading up to that time frame. So that also explains why so many of them are done. What we see is that things get grouped over time. So you won't see something, you'll see for a while, and then a bunch more changes made.
I forgot to mention that I do have a clock, and I have to apologize in advance because I am a very nice person, but I do have, and I want to respect the time of everyone, so I have to interrupt you, and I apologize for that sincerely. Madame Auguste.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to begin by thanking Colonel Jardine for your presence here and for your service, as well as Mr. Shippers for your testimony here today. I'll begin by asking if, for the benefit of the committee, in order to better understand your motivation and commitment, can you explain to us how your military career has affected your work. You have a lot of a wealth of experience that veterans appreciate, I'm certain, and it would be very useful for the committee members to better know you in this regard. Thank you for that question.
My French is also very rusty. Usually I like to say I need a glass of red wine to make it work better, but maybe not today. First of all, I believe that the person in this position must be a veteran. In order to be credible in the veterans community, the person who occupies this job must be a veteran. And what I bring to the table, I have served in all three environments, with the Air Force, with the Navy, and with the Army, although not in a combat unit, because when I joined the Army, women did not serve in combat roles. So I missed that opportunity. I have, as an officer, I've led soldiers at all ranks, and I was privileged to have been given command of a unit, which is the pinnacle of service in the military. So I bring that understanding of command as well. I also, as a senior officer, worked in National Defense Headquarters in the capital procurement, was involved in, buying military trucks. And I served overseas in Afghanistan for almost a year. And I have the experience of having, I've been out for so many years, and it's been over 15 years since I deployed. But I had to leave my young son at home for a year while I deployed. So I bring that level of experience. I'm also went to military college in the third class that accepted women. So I have that experience of having served as a woman when women were not necessarily welcomed with open arms, shall we say.
Merci beaucoup, puis encore une fois, merci pour votre...
Thank you very much, and once again, thank you for your service, particularly this week. Colonel, you also mentioned that you deliberately tried to meet with veterans and their families, and you went across the country to do so. Why did you consider this to be an important task? What has that allowed you to learn? Thank you very much again.
And I served up until 2019. I had no idea that there was an Office of the Veterans Ombudsman. I knew about the D&D CAF Ombudsman, but I had no clue that there was a Veterans Ombudsman as well. And so I figured if I didn't know, I was certain that there were many people in service who did not also know about our office and the veteran community as well. So I thought that it would be important to go out and do this outreach program, and we focused on the military bases so that we could speak to commanders and share with them what they needed to do to help their soldiers when they left the military, and how, if they were going to put in a claim with Veterans Affairs, what they needed to ensure is on their service health record. Military people do not, as a normal matter of course, go to the doctor when they're not well or they have an injury. If that evidence is missing from their service health record, it's much harder to get a disability claim approved. That connection to service is so critical. And so we went to commanders and we spoke about this. We visited transition centers and military family resource centers to hear from them firsthand how they are helping members to make that transition from military life to civilian life, and most importantly, or more equally importantly, how their families are also being supported in that transition. And then we did our town halls in the evenings, several places in around the base. Most people in the military retire near a base where they served last. I have as well. And so that's how we thought we would design our outreach program. And you're absolutely right. We have heard a great deal.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Colonel. Did you have the opportunity to meet the minister, Jill McKnight? And is she aware of your objective with those meetings?
Minister McKnight, and it was an introduction meeting. I shared with her some of the things that I have been hearing out on in our town halls and in outreach.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Merci. Thank you. Madame Gaudreau.
Madame Gaudreau. Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank you for being here today with us. And greetings to Colonel Jardine, and to you as well, Mr. Schipper. And of course, to all of the veterans that are watching this meeting, because indeed it's important that they be aware that you exist. And that's why I have a few questions that really appear quite surprising to me. With all of the engagement of veterans, and I have several who have come to see me in my offices, many feel abandoned and perhaps not valued to the degree to which they have served. So these are individuals. You had 35% more complaints, is that what you said? Yes, that is correct. And if we set aside the complaints, whether it's because of delays for being accompanied or having access to a family doctor, because, for example, in Quebec, well, good luck finding a family doctor, and the other issue of inequity and injustice. If you could give an approximate ratio, is it pretty equal? My objective is to try and see what we need to focus on most. Thank you for the question.
We receive are from veterans who have an approved condition, a disability benefit, and they are now in treatment because they're entitled to treatment benefits for that condition for life. And the majority of the complaints we get are around the fact that their treatment benefit that they are seeking has been denied by Veterans Affairs. And that's probably the most important, that's the wrong word, the most common complaint we get. We also hear complaints about the rehabilitation program and the connection to the income replacement benefit. And the disability wait time, the wait time to get a decision is still a complaint that we hear, but it has absolutely sort of slipped to second place, if you will. The way that VAC communicates with veterans, and let me reiterate, the majority of veterans are satisfied with the service they receive from Veterans Affairs. They come up to me very quietly. They don't stand up and say, I'm really happy with VAC. They come up to me quietly and they say, you know, I'm really happy with Veterans Affairs. I couldn't be happier. Very satisfied. The ones that, so we get complaints about, you know, I got a decision I'm not happy with, and we can help with that. Veterans who, but there is a cohort of veterans who struggle to meet the administrative ask of the department, who grapple with feelings of institutional betrayal. It's a complex thing because for veterans, trust is so critical. And so where they grapple with that, they have a much harder time asking for what they need and receiving what they need.
Donc, ce que je comprends, Madame la Présidente.
If I understand correctly, Madam Chair, it's that the relationship under which these benefits are offered and the follow-up, there's a great deal of diligence involved. That's to say that someone who for the first time in their life is losing their job and has to find the right files in order to get these benefits is one thing. But when someone has served and they expect that they will be accompanied in honor of what we've done, the person has done. What I understand is that those wait times can, for some people, be all right, but for some people, we're not meeting the target. That's what I'm understanding here. That's exactly correct.
Happy, satisfied with Veterans Affairs. They can ask for what they need. They get what they need. The group that struggle, it's my impression, and I'm still working to understand it better myself. Their needs are more acute. Their feelings of institutional betrayal are maybe greater, or they just struggle to meet that administrative ask, and so for them, it's a much more difficult process. And this concept of trust and institutional trust is huge for veterans. We serve, and we're told that, you know, if you're hurt or ill afterwards, Veterans Affairs will be there for you. And they see their buddies, you know, getting their disability benefits, and they're getting their treatment benefits. But for them, somehow they run into some friction. And for them, that friction equals betrayal. And now it's a fight to the death. And I'm sorry. Yes.
Sentence?
Yeah, it's a battle.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. We'll now begin the second round of questions. So just for people who are watching or who are new parliamentarians and some who are perhaps a tad bit rusty, we will have 5 minutes each for the Conservatives and the Liberals, and 2.5 minutes for Ms. Gaudreau. So I will now give the floor to Mr. Viersen.
And thank you to our witnesses for being here. I'm interested to hear a little bit more about these town halls that you held around the country. I live near the base at Edmonton. You said you held them nearby. Did you make it out like 200-300 kilometers from there? Whitecourt, Barrhead, that area. I have veterans in my constituency. How did you come to the decisions on where to hold these town halls?
Thank you. So we started with the base, and then the Royal Canadian Legion has been extremely generous with us. My colleague approaches the Legion and says, is anybody willing to host us? We've tried in hotels. The Legions, it seems to work really well. So it's wherever a Legion is willing to host us, usually in that local area. But we have been to Smoky Lake. Although we didn't do a town hall, we were invited. So this is the other way that we chose where to go, is we get invitations. As we're becoming well known, people reach out to us and invite us to come and do a presentation, which necessarily turns into kind of a town hall in that we hear from people. So we were in Métis Crossing to contribute to the Métis Service Officer training, and then we were up in Cold Lake as well.
Okay. And so that's Alberta. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Have you been to all provinces and territories?
We absolutely have.
Okay.
And although we're going to Whitehorse in 2 weeks.
Okay. So similarly, I did a whole series of town halls across northern Alberta this summer. Fascinatingly, you get, regardless if I just set them up as open-ended deal, you get the same 5 issues that come forward. Fascinatingly, was that your experience similarly? And what's the top 5 things that folks would come to you with?
The number one concern of veterans today is access to a family doctor. It is and I know it's the same for many Canadians, but for veterans, because you serve all across the country, you may not even be able to get in with your family doctor, if they even have one. And so the stories are heart-rending. We heard from a veteran who said, my doctor fired me because the back paperwork is onerous. So you're too much trouble. A veteran who Anyway, I have I can tell you stories. So access to a family doctor, the number one pressing concern. Denial of any kind of decision from Veterans Affairs that they're unhappy with. We hear the whole range of those. So the treatment benefits, so wait times for disability claims. These are the main. Why can't I get X benefit? I think I should be able to get X benefit. That kind of thing.
Just probably my last question here. If you want to come back to some of these items, that would be fine. I just want to get my last question in before my time runs out here. PCVRS, we get quite a bit of complaints about it, and it's not even necessarily from people that have experiences with it, but people that are watching it and are concerned about double dipping or favorable treatment of particular contractors or that kind of thing. Did you hear any of that through your town halls?
Yes, I did. We do get complaints about PCVRS, the rehabilitation program, and our approach has been the complaints we get about PCVRS and the implementation of this contract for the rehabilitation program. We pass those directly to the person in charge of implementing it in Veterans Affairs in the hopes that, whatever it is can be resolved quickly. So that has always been, that's been what we have done. And our intent in all of the work that we do is to reconnect the veteran back to the department, because it's going to be a lifelong.
I think you and I are good on that. The challenge, I guess, is probably more systematic. Like people are concerned about and I don't know if this is your purview or not, but like the whole decision to do the PVRS instead of keeping it in-house with Veterans Affairs. Can you manage that as an issue? Is that outside the scope of your organization? Just like a comment on that.
While we get complaints about it, they appear to be, with respect to implementation, something that the department could fix. Okay. So we have not yet received a preponderance of complaints that would lead us to believe there was an unfairness.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Vierzen, and I've been quite generous on my part, so rest assured I will be as generous for others. Nous sommes maintenant rendus à pièce Casey.
We're now to Mr. Casey.
And welcome, Ms. Jardine, Mr. Shippers. It's good to have you here. Certainly appreciate the work that you do on behalf of veterans. I want to come back to the topic that was raised by Mr. Tolmie, who noted on his extensive review of the documents that you've provided that there's a lot more green check marks prior to 2015 than after that. I note that prior to 2015, in the information that you provided to us, there are 19 recommendations which you indicate are no longer tracked. Now, in your introductory remarks, you indicate that in some circumstances, events overtake the recommendations, which results in them being no longer tracked. But I wonder if you can speak to the fact that there are pre-2015 19 recommendations no longer tracked, and if there is a pattern there that you can explain to us why that categorization of pre-2019 recommendations is so prevalent.
Thank you for the question. I'm not sure. Dwayne, I wonder if you could please.
So I would say part of it is a maturity of the office over time. I would say that the office, when it first started, was largely doing a lot of advocacy, like kind of blue sky, this is what veterans should have, but not necessarily.
I remember Pat Stogren.
Right, so not necessarily about fairness and assessing, and there are some standards today, as the office has matured and other ombuds offices around the country have matured around the focus on fairness. So you will see a change in the tone of recommendations from the early days of our office to the later days around how things are worded. And like often they were open scoped. They were things that were very much nice to haves as opposed to really focused on a fairness assessment. So some of them have been taken off for that. Some of them have been removed just because of time. And our position is that if it's still really relevant and an ongoing issue, we will do an update report on it. So after 10 years, we really start to look at it as, so if the department hasn't moved on it after 10 years, we either are probably going to drop it or do a new report that is updated to push that issue again.
There were 35 pre-2015 recommendations that are recorded as having been fully implemented. Do you track the dates on which those recommendations are implemented? The fact that they are pre-2015 recommendations doesn't necessarily mean that the implementation took place pre-2015, I take it?
That's correct.
Do you have a sense of when they were implemented?
We have this massive document over here is the full work that we do that has all of the explanations from the department. If there were ones in particular you wanted us to find out when they were actually done, I believe that we would be able to bring that to you.
Okay. Thank you for that. Over to Mr. Vierson's, the topic that Mr. Vierson raised on the implementation of the PCVRS contract. I'm pretty sure, Ms. Jardine, you were in this office before the PCVRS contract came in. Did you receive complaints with respect to the management of veterans' files within the rehabilitation service prior to this contract?
Thank you for the question. I'm not certain. Do you recall, Dwayne?
We did receive complaints about the, and we continue to receive complaints, but they're always, if I were to look at who the complaints were from, what we saw with the PCVRS contract, leading into the contract, there were lots of complaints from the union and from the from providers who were concerned about losing business or things being redirected. Very few complaints from individual veterans, and where we have received a complaint from the individual veteran, as Colonel Jardine mentioned, we've gone to the department, and the department has acted fairly quickly on the individual complaints. There's still some friction, I would say, on the provider side of things.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Merci. Madame Gaudreau.
Ms. Gaudreau. Thank you, Madam Chair. Now, I'd like to know, because we have an overview, an update, are you aware of other countries that have a relationship or ways of doing things that are an inspiration for us, that we might aim for? I think it's important, given the increase in the defense budget. We're in a different time, which brings me to say that we will never be able to change the past, but in the present, there's an important path that's open. So is there a country that really could inspire us, given what you have looked at?
Conference of the Ombuds of the Armed Forces in last year for the first time. And while I can't say for certain, I believe that that countries look to us. I base this on, I was speaking to a German officer who said, I'm coming to Canada to learn about how Canada provides benefits to their veterans. The Norwegian Ombud of the Armed Forces invited me to come to a conference in Norway to explain how Canada's veteran benefits are designed and delivered. So I take that as a compliment to Canada, that others look at what we do for our veterans and ask, what are they doing? How can we learn from Canada?
Oui, mais en fait, ma question.
Yes, but in fact, my question is, are there countries that we could be inspired by to improve? It's wonderful if we are the inspiration, but I'm sorry, I don't know. Thank you.
Parfait. C'est bon?
Okay.
Richard, 5 minutes.
I have a few things I wanted to ask, but I actually wanted to pick up on this. There's been a couple of people asking questions about the PCVRS and the rehabilitation services. You had, Mr. Jardine, indicated, like, very, very quickly responded to the question of whether you'd had complaints about the PCVRS contract with a yes, you certainly had. And then when you were asked about, the rehabilitation services prior to PCVRS, you weren't as certain. Mr. Shippers then indicated, though, that there's been very few from actual veterans. Would you agree with that statement, that it's been very few from actual veterans? Because that doesn't square with what I know I hear as someone who's been involved with this committee. I hear a lot of complaints, but would you say that it's been very few from veterans on PCVRS?
Well, thank you for the question. I think what my colleague Dwayne was saying is that prior to the award of the contract to PCVRS, there were fewer, we didn't hear as many complaints, and that I defer to him because that was before my time.
No, that's fine. If that's what it was, then I misunderstood. So that makes more sense to me. And you mentioned then that you typically what you've done with those complaints is when it's coming from a veteran, you're passing them on to the person at VAC responsible for implementing the PCVRS. What does your office then do in terms of follow-up? Like, are you able to give us any indication as to whether there ended up being some resolution, whether the veteran ended up being able to get help or some satisfaction from those interactions that they had with where you've referred them, or what kind of follow-up do you do to determine that?
Yes, thank you. It is our understanding that the department works quickly to resolve what the issue is that the veteran was complaining about. For example, a veteran attended an appointment at the PCVRS office, could overhear another veteran talking in the treatment room, and was worried that people would overhear him. So he complained to our office, and we connected that complaint to Veterans Affairs. Our understanding is that they work quickly to overcome that. So when we don't hear back from the veteran that it hasn't been resolved, our understanding is that it has been.
Okay, so it's more of a, if you don't hear back, there's not really a lot of follow-up that occurs. Okay, that's fine. Let me ask you, you mentioned also that the majority of veterans that you hear from are happy, but you obviously do have complaints. And you mentioned then in response to some questions from Ms. Goudreau, it's mostly those who sort of have that struggle with institutional betrayal, or we might call it sanctuary trauma. But can you maybe give us a sense, would you be able to give us the profile of what that veteran looks like? Is that a younger veteran versus an older veteran? Is that someone? Is there certain types of service that maybe that veteran would look more like, or certain types of injury that veteran might have? Is there any kind of a profile or pattern to who those veterans would be that experience those institutional betrayal or sanctuary trauma type of situations, or is it random?
Thank you. To be honest, it's veterans, family members. I would, and I'm still working to understand this myself, it's ones whose needs are more acute. Survivors of, so widows and widowers, their interactions with the department, we've heard complaints about how that's going, and so for them, there's a struggle with the department. Veterans who have mental health issues, PTSD or operational stress injury, I believe, it's my intuition, if you will, that I'm working to validate that they may struggle more with the department.
Okay. Well, let me just quickly then ask you, you mentioned family doctors being the number one thing you hear from veterans. I hear it a lot as well. I'm sure we all do. And it very typically is associated with the paperwork. I hear all the time from veterans who say, I cannot get a doctor because every doctor tells me I don't want to deal with all the Veterans Affairs paperwork. You seem to have identified that issue as well. Do you have any, I mean, obviously other than reducing the amount of paperwork, which certainly needs to happen, do you have any other suggestions on how we can either reduce that paperwork burden or other suggestions we can have to help veterans get family doctors?
I've been extremely generous on my left versus being very firm on my right. At the will of the committee, would we allow Colonel Jardine to answer the question? I just want to make sure everybody's comfortable. Colonel Jardine.
It's a difficult question. From what I see, on the one hand, this is taxpayers' money we're talking about. And therefore, I think it is important that the department have in place procedures and process and policy to ensure that taxpayers' money goes where Parliament wanted it to go. On the other hand, could things be more streamlined? I would hope so, because there are so many people who are saying this is so difficult. So I certainly share that with the deputy and the minister when I speak with them.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
It's for you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Colonel Jardine and Mr. Shippers, for being here today. I really appreciate your time and the answers you've given us so far. I actually did want to follow up a little bit on the question that Mr. Richards asked there at the end, because I spent time in the provincial legislature in Nova Scotia, and of course, access to family doctors was probably the number one issue that we dealt with there. You know, in Nova Scotia, somewhere between 10 and 15% of the general population does not have access, and obviously that's regionally different. But I guess my question would be, there's an obvious interplay there between the provincial governments and VAC and others to make sure that we can make positive progress on this issue. So perhaps could you just talk a little bit about what that looks like? You know, what is the interplay between the two levels of government to make sure that veterans actually have access to this and that we start to move on what you identified as the number one issue that you heard over the summer?
Thank you for the question. I'm not sure that I'm the best place to answer how government should, the provincial and federal, how that should work. I don't think I am qualified to answer that question. All I can tell you is that veterans need this because of the Canadian Forces veterans, because they get their prescriptions, for example, through their military doctor. And then on the day they leave, they got their baggie with their 3 months worth of that prescription for whatever their medical condition is. And if it's a complex medication, to get that refilled, you can't go to a walk-in clinic, you can't go to the ER. So how can that be done? Is the obstacle to be, is the thing to be sort of figured out. Mm-hmm. So I'm sorry, I'm not qualified to answer the heart of your question.
No, I appreciate that, and I think perhaps in your own personal experience as well, having been a service member for several decades, was this always a number one issue for folks, like in your own experience, or has that evolved and changed over time, in your view?
I believe it is within the past 5 to 7 years issue that we didn't hear about an issue to get family doctors. I knew from my own personal experience my family was unable to get a family doctor in the area that I lived. It took several years before my family could get a family doctor. But it wasn't something I was, personally aware of. Where I've heard it, of course, is in this job, and it seems to have been exacerbated since COVID.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, and I appreciate that. I think earlier, it was Mr. Tolmie who asked questions about how difficult it is to implement the recommendations that you put forward. So I guess when your office is developing recommendations to put forward to the department, what kinds of considerations go into that? Do you consider, for example, what the legal, financial, human resources implications of a recommendation might be? And is there any way to, how does that factor into your decision-making on how quickly it's reasonable to see a recommendation fulfilled, or, almost grading them on a curve in some ways, right? Not all recommendations are created equal in terms of the difficulty of actually executing on them. So could you just give us some insight into how you think through that process?
Thank you. The analysts that we have that do this work are very highly educated and are very well versed in being able to read the legislation, regulation, and policies, and to understand how that entire, how they all work together in order to deliver a program or a benefit to veterans. So the work that goes into doing the study of the issue where we've perceived a gap or an unfairness, and then to make those findings, we do this to an academic level. Many of our reports are probably not ones that veterans would enjoy reading, but which is why we try to provide an executive summary or message from me to put it kind of in lay language. But we write those aimed at the department so that they know that we understand to a very deep level what it is we are talking about and where we have found unfairness, so that these reports are credible to them.
Time's up.
Time's up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much again for this round. We are now at our substantial third round, basically, and I would like to invite Mrs. Wagenthal for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair, and so good to see you again, Ms. Jardine and Dwayne. It means a lot to have you here, and I can say thank you for the times that my office has reached out to you to get clarification on things, and it has always been accurate and fair, and a very good tool for us to use, so thank you. In your notes here, in 2021, you talk about something that you would want to see, and the government apparently wants to see, but it's not implemented. And it's something we've discussed a lot as a recommendation at this committee over the last decade, and that is the unique impact of military service on the mental health and well-being of not just the veteran, but their family members. And you've been calling for the government to ensure that government-funded mental health treatment would be there for those family members in their own right, regardless of whether the veteran's on a treatment plan or not. And I don't know where to go with this to get clarity with the government, because there is no question that veterans that do struggle impact their families, and then that impacts them. And something that would help those veterans significantly is that their family members be able to get the help they need, which I've known has ended up helping them to turn around and get the help that they've been waiting a decade to get. So what can you say to the reasons why? What are the barriers to this actually taking place?
Thank you for the question. This is one that is very near and dear to my heart. When a veteran is receiving mental health treatment that the department is paying for, if the clinician believes that the veteran's well-being will be improved, or that their progress or their healing will be improved, or if their family also had treatment, it's all focused on the veteran. And the family members, the department, I have to give them credit. They do their very best for families. If they can link it to the veterans' treatment, they do. If there is family breakdown, as soon as there's a family breakdown or a divorce or separation, the spouse and possibly the children are no longer eligible to be part of the veteran's family. If the veteran is not interested in being treated, doesn't want to have their family included, the family doesn't have that access. When the veteran dies, the family is immediately cut off. And it's truly heartbreaking to witness. This happened to me at a town hall. And the only thing I could say to this widow is that the law says that it has to be for the veteran. And this is legislation. You can't ask the department to break the law. But that is very cold comfort to a widow whose veteran has passed away.
So do I have a moment yet? Good? Okay, wonderful. So you wanted to encourage VAC to explore expanding and obtaining additional authorities to minimize the financial costs around mental health treatment for family members. And this included expanding access to treatment sessions for some family members. So this is in conjunction with that, or just in a case where the veteran is fine with them having the support or getting the support himself, his or herself?
I believe this requires, I know this requires a legislative change that affords or acknowledges that the family also serves. We say that when the member serves, the family also serves, but to acknowledge this would be to provide Veterans Affairs with the authority to provide mental health treatment for service-related mental health, not just, but where there's a clear connection to service of their veterans' service or their members' service. So this is a clear allocation of resources for family members when their mental health has been affected by being part of a military family.
So what is the barrier? Why is that not happening when it says yes, that these are things that are important to the government? So why are those policy changes not taking place? What needs to happen?
Madame, I would ask you to direct that question to the department.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Erdl, for 5 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Colonel Jardine and Mr. Shippers, again, for being here. We really very much appreciate your input today. Coming back to the Spotlight report, I'm struck by the number of recommendations that have been implemented and see this as an encouraging sign that, as I'm sure you do, believe the governments have listened and sought to action the recommendations of your office. I'm, of course, aware that there are some recommendations that are outstanding and there's still more work to do. So can you help us understand briefly how you arrived at these recommendations?
Each of those thank you very much. Each of those recommendations is as a result of an academic level deep study of the issue and findings. Each one is based on a finding of unfairness. So unfairness meaning a gap or a barrier in the equitable access to benefits and services provided by the department based on the legislation that Parliament has put in place. So that is where each recommendation seeks to resolve a finding of unfairness in the entire sort of legislation, regulation, policy framework of veterans' benefits.
Okay, thank you. If I could circle back to my colleague's question regarding the items that are no longer tracked. I believe you had mentioned there was a 10-year period after which, if they weren't being, or no action had happened, that you'd either drop it or do a new report to update it, I think is the term that you use. Is that because you see that they're no longer relevant? Or is it because of an inability to actually track progress? Can you expand on that a little bit?
Thank you. It would not be because we can't track the progress. We get a thorough answer from the department on each and every recommendation. If it's no longer tracked, it's simply because it's not relevant. Did I miss something, Dwayne?
The time.
Or the time, yes.
Or the time.
I'm grateful to have him here beside me.
Okay, that's interesting. I don't know what my time is. 2 minutes? Okay, great. Thank you for that. And recognizing that your responsibility is to assess the work of the department and the Minister of Veterans Affairs, and that the onus is on you and your office to continue to review and identify ways to improve, do you feel your efforts are bearing fruit? Or how do you view the actions undertaken or not by the department to act on your recommendations?
Thank you. So every single veteran that we are able to help, in my view, is a veteran who is reconnected to the department. We're working to repair that relationship that they will have with Veterans Affairs for the rest of their life. And so I see that as every single veteran is an accomplishment, where in the individual complaints. In the systemic work that we do, if we are able to make a recommendation and the department puts that in place, implements it, then we've rectified an unfairness for a group of veterans that may have been affected by that. So the overarching purpose that it's not written down anywhere, but this is how we see our work, is to reconnect veterans who are unhappy with a decision they've gotten from the department, and to reconnect them and to help to repair that trust and that relationship, because they will be in that relationship for a lifetime.
Good. Time? A little quick. Is there an average, and this is not the right term perhaps, lifespan of a relationship? Is there an average time that the veterans would be involved with Veterans Affairs, that there would be that?
So veterans who seek benefits and who have been approved for a condition, that's from the date of that approval, or since they interacted with the department until their death. So there's not an average. They may become a veteran when they're 21. They may become a veteran when they're 59 or 58, like me. So.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Madame Gaudreau, 2.5.
Madame Gaudreau, 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I understood that under the current legislation, it would perhaps be a good idea at this point in time. I thought that we should really look at our own consciences when we think of veterans, that would bring us to make this a priority. And following your recommendations, and Madam Chair, I'd really like to ask Colonel Jardine if you have recommendations. There were 35 10 years ago, but if we had 5 that would be the top 5 priority to present to our new minister as to what we should do over the next few months, what are the most urgent. I think that we've seen a change or that we should have a change in culture that would bring us to the point where these families will no longer have to experience this. I have no experience whatsoever in this domain, but for 15 years, I've been hearing about this when there's a change in the family situation, that the veteran finds themselves alone, and it's as though it didn't exist anymore. So there must surely be other things we can assess, but it really affects me. And I'd like to ask you to identify, because I don't have enough time to let you respond, I would like you to set out what should be the priorities, and that would allow us to help you as best we can. What do you think of all that? Madam, I hope I understood you properly.
I would say is my priority. My priority is mental health. Of the recommendations I've made, not talking about doctors, of those recommendations, mental health supports for family members is the one I believe is the most acute, and that we have to stop asking families to shoulder this burden as they have for so long.
Et s'il y a d'autres choses,
And if there's anything else, I invite you to send us a written response, please.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Minutes.
Sure, thanks. A couple things I want to, I guess, follow up on. A couple of people have raised the issue, but I had kind of planned to ask you about it as well and ran out of time, which was around the mental health piece for veterans' families in specific. You've had the opportunity to talk about it a little bit today, but one thing that I don't think I've heard is you've mentioned that there needs to be legislative change. What would you recommend that change should be? What should the legislative change actually be that would like? Are you simply just indicating that we need to ensure that whether the veteran is still with us or not, the family has access, or is it broader than that? Can you tell me, or just opening up the access a little more loosely? Is that what we're talking about, or what's the legislative change you think is needed there?
Thank you for the opportunity to clarify. What we are recommending is that legislation be put in place that affords the department the authority to provide mental health treatment for family members when their mental health issue is connected to service. So that's key for us. It's not just anything, it's connected to service, and that it be independent of whether the veteran is in treatment or not, that it doesn't have to be connected to the veteran's treatment, and that this would also capture, therefore, the family members of veterans who pass away for whatever whatever cause.
Okay, appreciate that. Let me ask you, I've got two other questions for you. The first one being around, some of the things you've heard at town halls. You mentioned a couple of the most significant ones, but there's, one issue that's out there, I think, for just generally amongst Canadians, it's one of the top issues right now is cost of living, cost of housing. We hear a lot about homelessness amongst veterans, and I'm wondering if this is an issue you've had raised during any of your town halls or through any of your conversations with veterans, and what would you say would be some of the unique challenges that veterans would face in these regards with cost of living or homelessness?
Thank you for that question. I had the opportunity to visit the men's shelter in Fredericton, and we had a conversation with the executive director, and I asked him, how does this happen? And I think he gave me the most succinct answer I've ever heard. He said, people fall out of their families, and for many reasons, and they're complex. Mental health, addiction, these are key factors in what causes someone to fall out of their family. Addressing those things, and I don't think it necessarily makes it unique to veterans. What veterans have as well is that the PTSD, the mental health issues related to service, institutional trust, the feelings of betrayal, all of that can combine and exacerbate the reasons why someone may, as this person said, fall out of their family.
Sure, and I just want to follow up on a question I'd asked you earlier when we were talking about the PCVRS contract, and I asked you about the follow-up that happens when they're referred back to VAC. And you've mentioned several times today about, and I think it's a worthwhile goal. Like you're trying to connect them back into VAC because there is going to be that relationship for the lifetime, and you want to see that relationship repaired. But my concern, I guess, is there a chance that your office may be inadvertently sort of contributing to that sanctuary trauma or institutional betrayal that people feel? And this is what I want to ask about. And I do this with. I know that your goal is not certainly to do that, but I worry that it might be happening inadvertently. because I'm concerned when I hear, like, you know, unless the veteran kind of gets back to us, we don't necessarily, there isn't really a follow-up there. And I'm not sure I know what to suggest it should be, but I'm concerned that it, like, when you say that you're reviewing the complaints that you receive within 60 days in most cases, would a review consist of something like this? Would it be referring them back to the department? Would that kind of conclude the review? I'm just concerned that we're, you know, if a veteran
No. So, I'm so sorry, Mr. Richards. I've been very generous. You have exceeded, and they have not yet spoken. I'll give you a 15 seconds briefly.
I apologize for only leaving you that.
So, our frontline that takes complaints, they won't close the file until they know what's been done over at Veterans Affairs. I meet with the Director General responsible for PCVRS on a monthly basis, and issues that aren't resolved, they come up again the following month, and we find out where those, how those things are being dealt with. So it's not like there's no follow-up. There is.
Sorry, Mrs. Ertl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Speaking of complaints, the Ombuds's website, the report indicates, has seen a consistent year-on-year growth in both complaints and requests for information. I'm wondering, to what do you attribute this increase? And are concerns being raised on a small cross-section or across a more broad range of issues?
Thank you. I believe that the increase in complaints is due to the increased awareness of the service our office provides. So the return on investment on the outreach program, the treatment benefits, disability decisions, the time it takes, the difficulty just putting in the claim, process issues, and the rehabilitation program and income replacement benefit. Those are the top complaints we receive.
Okay, thank you. I'll share the rest of my time with my colleague, Mr. Casey.
I'm going to just continue to follow up on that exact same line of questioning. You indicated that a part of the reason, or the main reason, for the increase in traffic in your office is because of your outreach efforts. So, congratulations. I understand that part of the outreach efforts included town halls and that the Legions have been cooperative. I'd like to hear more detail of what else constitutes the increased outreach that has resulted in this increased volume. I know that many veterans groups have their association in a virtual format as opposed to in person. So I'd be interested for you to provide us with a summary of what constitutes the outreach program that has had these, I guess, from our position, positive effects.
Yes, thank you very much. So we've received invitations from many veteran organizations. So the Legion has invited us to veteran coffee breaks, to their provincial command conventions. We've had invitations to the Army, Navy, Air Force veterans conventions. Local veteran stakeholder groups, people who are working on behalf of veterans, have also invited us to come and speak with them and meet with veterans in their locate. For example, Canna Connect is a company that provides a space for veterans, and they invite us to come for a coffee break where they know veterans will be there. So we've had a lot of invitations. Indigenous, the Métis have invited us to contribute to their service officer training. The Southern Chiefs organization in Manitoba also invited us to come to their day that they held, a Veterans Awareness Day. I don't have the right words exactly what it was called. It was a full day. So it's not just the town halls. It's been all of these other things.
Okay. Thank you. In your introductory remarks, you pointed to one of the successes you had around the clawback of the class action awards to victims of military sexual trauma. I'd like to hear a bit more on that, your efforts on behalf of that group of veterans and how that came to be.
Yes, thank you. The Merlo-Davidson class action lawsuit was the RCMP women who put in the class action about sexual misconduct on the job. The settlement provided 6 levels of compensation, and the law says that Veterans Affairs cannot compensate you twice for the same condition. So these women put in their disability pension applications and filled out very honestly if they had received settlement from the Merlo-Davidson. And the department was obligated to reduce their disability pension by the amount of their settlement. We heard these complaints. It was brought to us by the RCMP, Veterans Association Women's Council. And we did a deep dive into the entire settlement, the construct of the settlement, and what it was meant to compensate for. And we found that the first 2 levels were absolutely not meant to compensate for chronic conditions. The disability pension provides compensation to veterans for chronic conditions. So there was a clear conflict there. And the remaining levels, the department had never provided any rationale for what degree of offset they would take. So I wrote a letter to the minister outlining all of this. My understanding is that every veteran RCMP woman, former RCMP officer, was contacted by the department, and whatever needed to be done to resolve that unfairness was done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. And before we...
Thank you very much.
Mr. Tomey to say a few words.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Confession to you, I think the loneliest time in my life is when I drop off my kids and I'm leaving to come to Ottawa. And I feel that because I've learned through my children that they spell love T-I-M-E, time. And through your testimony today, when you shared about your separation and being away from your son, when we share and we acknowledge your service, I want you to know that this committee truly does mean it, because we understand what you have endured and what you have done for not only our country, but for your son. And so I want to say thank you on behalf of the committee. We appreciate it.
Je suis certaine qu'on va avoir
I'm sure that we'll have the opportunity to see each other again, so we'll see you next time. And before leaving you, committee members, I just wanted to remind you that the deadline to submit your lists of witnesses for the suicide prevention study is the Friday, the 26th of September at 7 p.m. So you can send your list to the clerk by email. And I would also like to point out that this week, the 25th of September,
Black veterans, so you will receive notification of that. And just to confirm, our minister has accepted our invitation and will be here on October 21st. Donc, sur ce, le comité souhaite...
On that note, would the committee like to adjourn the meeting?
I just want to put it publicly. I've expressed it to Mr. Casey, but I've also expressed it to the minister personally, so I will express it here. Just that we are disappointed, obviously, that she has not agreed to come prior to the break week in October as we had asked, and that she's only offering to come for 1 hour rather than 2 as the committee had asked. That is extremely disappointing, especially for a new minister. Lots of questions. I wanted to put that on the record. I think it's important we do that.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Richards.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richards. And on that note, does the committee wish to adjourn the meeting?